Hey y'all, and welcome back to another Photoshop tutorial. My name is Jane Corley with PicVisions, Media Arts and Photography. If it's your first time here, welcome. Every Monday we go over tips, tools, and techniques to become a better post-production artist in Adobe Photoshop. Today we are learning about how to edit modeling, fashion, and product models photography. I'm going to use this really great example of a good friend of mine, John. He has a small business here in Columbia with men's accessories, bow ties, and pocket squares in particular. He's a really great guy. I'll link him in the description box below if you're interested. Let's get started. There are a few issues here blown out in the highlights area. We want to check some framing things, and we want to really bump up the color and make the image exaggerated and more intriguing for viewers, and we want to make the focus the product. So let's get started. Like we always do, we're going to duplicate our background layer. I will say first and foremost, if you are not familiar with some of these techniques, please refer back to my previous videos. I go a lot more in depth. This is a little bit more than a beginner's course, so I'm going to move kind of quickly and get you guys some really great content relatively quickly. So after we've duplicated the background copy, I'm going to go through my preferred adjustment layers. I like to start with levels. You have your shadows, highlights, midtone slider. Of course, hit the Alt or Option key and it will identify where your highest shadows are. And I like to get it about there before they start too much clipping. Then I'm going to bring my highlights up. You see we have some areas where it's already blown out, and I have some pretty white, if not whitest whites in these areas. So I don't want to mess too much with my highlights, not in initial phases. When I get into masking, I'll make those adjustments. Then I'm going to go to curves. I'm going to have a whole video on curves because curves and levels are two of my favorite things. You want to get an S-curve, or as close as you can to an S-curve, because an S-curve is a happy curve. And try to get it balanced in the content of the histogram. That's kind of how I like to think about it, because it's not an exact science, but curves offers a lot to an image. Then we're going to go to Vibrance. We have some really great vibrant colors in this image, the blues, the reds, but we want to showcase these yellows here. So this will be a mask. Because my colors in the background are already so great, I'm going to pay attention to only the vibrance and the saturation of the areas I want to showcase, the bow tie and the pocket square. So I've made those areas more vibrant. Control I to invert the mask over in this area here, which will cover the mask. As we've learned in our previous tutorials, using B for brush. Then you have your background and foreground color. Black will conceal a mask. As you see, the mask is concealed. Hitting X to switch your foreground and background colors will move you to white, where you can reveal the mask. White to reveal and black to conceal. That's the magic potion. B for brush, good to go. And our opacity is on 5%. Simply hit enter or return, and you can type it in on your number pad and just hit enter again, and it will set the number for you. That's for any of the marking tools. So we'll slowly paint on the mask at 10% opacity and gain that saturation and vibrance out of this layer. Like so. Bring it into the pocket square. And they're very small adjustments, but they will make a difference overall. See, we're already bringing a magenta into the pocket square. Zoom in a little bit with Control Plus. Ooh, we got some sharpening issues on here. Wonderful. We'll adjust them. In this area here. Like so, to bring this great color back in. Control 0 will zoom you out. I am going to use this yellow and green pump to bring out some of this nice color in his beard. This almost a blondie, strawberry blonde. And in the highlights of his hair, just to give it a little bump. And then these areas over here on his glasses to really dive the focus of the image into the face area near the bow tie and reflect on this friendly expression John has in his eyes and in his smile. He's love for his products, and really just make him look good. So let's move on to our color balance. Within this bow tie and the beard and everything here, I'm going to bump my greens bump my yellows, and we're going to bump, let's see, we want to go away from red because we have a lot of red here, and let's go more towards the cyans and bring out this deep blue color here in his pocket square. Control I to invert the mask, B for brush again, you're on white, and paint on that color adjustment, creating more vibrance in the product being showcased and drive the eye of the viewers to that location. This goes for any type of clothing model, this goes for any type of product photography, anything that you're working on. You want to showcase the purpose of the image. You want to really pull the viewer's eye through photo manipulation. Even just small amounts of photo manipulation will drive the viewer's eye to that area and really direct your future product wanters or your future customers to wanting your product. Bringing out the greens in the bow tie, how they reflect to the greens in the pocket square and the greens on the pin, and this yellow up in his glasses, and down here on his accentuating the beard area, just popping those yellows, making this the subject of the focus. Now, while we have that green and yellow out, it's almost like while we got the crayon out of the box, let's paint on some of these yellowy areas because it frames him. It adds as a border for your eyes, like this area over here. Get back in here in the middle and get back to the content. Get back to what we want you to look at. Driving these dividing lines. So pay attention to your backgrounds when you're shooting your images because you never know where these natural framing techniques will appear. Let's do another color balance layer, and I want to bring out the blues in his suit. Bring out the blues in the suit. Decrease the reds toward the cyans and bring up a little bit of green, a little bit less green. See what the magenta does. Oh, I like that direction. It's a little bit lighter blue here, a little bit darker, deeper blue here. I like that, and you'll see why. Control I to invert the mask, of course. I'm actually going to use this as a way to sculpture his body. You know, John is a big dude. He's probably knocking on the door of 7 feet. He's huge. So he's got a big frame. So I want to tighten up that frame a little bit. B for brush, good to go, still on white. I'm going to bump up my opacity to maybe 20%, double the opacity. And I'm going to paint in this mask layer in his shadow areas, accentuating not only the color blue of his suit, but also giving him a little bit more shape in his shadows and toning down some of these unwanted highlights in this area here, and really just using it for a multi-purpose layer. We're adding shadows and we're adding a color balance. Like so. And you can always rename your layers over here if you get a little heavy-handed and you've got a lot going on. You need to know where you're at. Alright, next let's go back to our background copy. I want to fix this too bright area here. Yes, I could fix it with exposure, I could fix it with levels. Let's fix it with the burn tool, or at least see how far we can get with the burn tool. If you saw in my shadows, midtones, and highlights videos, there's a ton of different ways to do just about anything in Photoshop, and the dodge and burn tool is really good for quick edits and quick adjustments. You don't want to go too far. It's Control Z to step backwards and Control Alt Z to continue to step backwards. It's the hotkey command. If you're new to my channel, I'm really big into hotkeys. What I'm going to do now is choose my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select a color in the shadows area because the burn tool is really just blowing this out. B for brush again, and we're going to go really low on the opacity, like a 2. Because we only want to calm down these whites. We don't want to eliminate them. See, it's almost like you're doing a color screen in a blending mode, but you're just painting it on. Just like we did in our portraits video, you're painting it on. Stay off the highlighted areas if you can, because you don't want to take all the shape out of the shirt. And if you really don't see the results you're looking for sooner rather than later, You can always Control plus and zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to bring it up to the collar area here as well, and paint on and calm down that highlight. I for eyedropper again to get a little darker color blue. B for brush to paint it on. Control 0, let's see where we're at. I'm going to calm down this area down here using the reverse approach, selecting this highlight area to calm this shadowed area down. If you still don't like the absence of lines or the suggestion of lines, you can come and actually invent those lines with the same process. Make your brush just much smaller and follow the line a few times, or you can increase your opacity and build those lines subtly in. If you start developing these harsh lines from burning, from putting color in over and over again, you can actually go to your hotkey J, your spot healing brush tool over here, and try to make a few content aware adjustments with your spot healing brush tool to make it look a little bit more natural, a little bit more organic in the way that the highlights and the shadows are meeting each other. And that looks a lot better. Let's go back in, and we're going to do the same process over here where these highlights are too hot, but we're going to do it here with the blue. B for brush. 10% should be alright. We want to create a hard line and bring some of those shadows back in. And we're simply just painting on a line and calming those highlights down. Next, this is a problem for most people who wear glasses, and we're going to learn a little bit of a lesson right now. There is some glare that I'm not a huge fan of. There's some glare here, and I just want to calm that down. So one way you can do it is just like we did the jackets, eyedropper, and calm that color down. Calm it down like so. Or you can use a sponge tool, S for sponge, brush a little bit smaller with your left bracket key, and make sure that you select an area where it's safe to copy from. Alt or Option key. The sponge tool is dangerous though. You see how we're kind of telling on ourselves? Control Z, Control Alt Z to step backwards. It's because your opacity is really high. Hit enter or return and 0, 5, and we're going to paint it on just like the eyedropper tool. I find with the clone stamp tool you really can tell on yourself a lot more than just a low opacity brush, but those are two different ways to get rid of glare. So next I'm going to rebuild his eyes, and what I mean by that is I'm going to put some white back into his eyes. I'm going to give him some pupils, some irises, so that he has direct eye contact, pulling the viewer into the product image. Create another blank layer, because we're going to need to be able to manipulate the opacity at will. We are going to zoom in a little bit more to get a little bit closer, and think about the way an eye is shaped. It's round and it's connected on both sides. It's kind of gross, but that's the way it works, y'all. It goes around an iris out to a point, like so, because it's round. Same over here. Out and around. This one you can kind of tell one is there, so we're going to follow the line that's kind of given to us, like so. Now because eyes are shaped like a ball, you want to give them highlight or just a little bit more white, giving them a roundness, giving a look of a shadow on either side. It gives them a roundness. Next we are going to add a little twinkle so that there's some direction to his eye. you need to make your brush very, very small. I'm at 1, so the smallest we can go. And position, a few clicks, a little twinkle in his eye. Now while we're here, we actually don't even need to make any opacity adjustments right now. It's kind of creepy how well that worked, right? We just want to give some direction to his eyes. We want to give a place for the viewer to look and then find the product. And this, I mean, it's a much more intriguing image, being able to see his eyes and seeing the shape of his eyes. I'm going to go back to my burn tool, and I'm going to give some depth to the pockets of his eyes as well. So down to background copy, pockets of his eyes, and darken those areas up, giving a depth. While I'm here, let me burn this a little bit. There we go. Work through the image, work around the image, and see what needs what, when, and know where your layers are, know how they work, and exaggerate everything. Exaggerate everything. You want to exaggerate the shadows in his frame. You want to exaggerate the shadows in his face. You want to calm down the highlights and really just give a new direction to the light. We're going to come into these pocket areas here right now and make those wrinkles a little less distracting. Doing what I like to call the claw move, because your hand kind of looks like a claw when you do it. It's Control, Alt, Shift, E as in everything, or Command, Option, Shift, E as in everything. That's going to create a copy of whatever is happening below it. It's a non-destructive layer, just like everything below it, and you can make adjustments on a stamp of all of the corrections you've made underneath it, making it a little bit easier to work with. No destruction, just a copy, which makes a huge difference. We're going to come in and do a sharpen in some of these areas that we want a little bit extra sharp. So this is the sharpen tool. You also have a blur and a smudge tool, which I love the smudge tool for hair and getting a little bit more wispy to the hair. Let's look at the sharpen tool, like so, and sharpen some of his facial expressions, like so, his eyes of course, and the product. Sharpen, if you do it a lot in a row, it does take a toll, especially if you're working on a laptop. So just be patient with it. Come in and burn a little bit in this tie area, give a little bit more shape. Like I said, just move across the image with the tools Photoshop has available for you. I know this is kind of a little bit different than probably a normal Photoshop tutorial that you've seen, but it's kind of just my workflow, and whoever it works for, awesome, welcome to the team. And whoever is not your style, you may learn a few new things, a few new tricks, doing things not the conventional way, and kind of just thinking a little bit outside the box about how you problem solve on this awesome platform. I'm going to do eye for eyedropper again. This shadow, as I'm kind of looking at it, is just a little bit distracting. So I'm going to calm it down and give a little bit more pink back to his flesh. So I talked about the burn tool. Let's talk about the dodge tool. The dodge tool is going to bring more highlight into an image. So take a look at his hat up here. I'm going to take more highlight into that image, giving an upper end bookend to the image, further drawing the eye back into the bow tie, which is the product, and the pocket square, which is the product. Next, I'm going to structure this as a frame as well, using a color balance layer. I'm going to bump my reds and bump my magentas. I only want to focus on this area here and a little bit of this door. Control I to invert the mask. B for brush. We are still on a soft brush. And paint on the areas you wish to expose that mask. What I'm doing and why I'm doing it is you want to draw the viewer's attention to the image. Using the leading lines and the background elements of your image, it just steps up your photography game so much. If you have questions about it, I did a video on Friday on my Photography Friday channel that has some really great content on modeling and fashion photography. So check that out if you are a photographer and not just a post-production artist and want to learn how to take better modeling and high fashion photos. So what we're going to do now is another claw move, Control Alt Shift E, and we're going to place a filter on this layer. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur is going to soften these areas with a slight blur. And the reason why I made a layer copy is because I'm actually going to put a mask on top of this layer copy because I don't want it to affect the entire image. I just want it to affect certain areas that I choose. So, mask, Control I to invert the masks, and you're back to normal. B for brush, we have white already selected, and we're going to make our brush about that size. 10% should work. And we're going to slowly paint on that layer. And it doesn't eliminate the wrinkles, but it definitely looks a whole heck of a lot better than the harsh look of these wrinkles over here. So let's fix them. So that looks a lot better. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to apply this same blur on his face to give softness to his skin. Do not go into the glasses area, as when you are looking through a pair of glasses, it is actually magnifying what's underneath, so those need to be clearer. Next, I want to do an overall sharpen of just him, of selective areas. So I need a layer that can have a mask applied to it with select adjustments removed. So just like we've done all before, Control Alt Shift E, and we're going to filter, sharpen, not sharpen edges, but sharpen more, because I want it to stand out, and that has made a huge difference. I hope you can see it, especially like look in his eyes. He's really got a focus to him now, and the product really has something popping. It's got it popping out. And actually, I don't need a mask on this. I like the effect that it gave it a little bit more shadowing in these shadow areas. So my final tip is going to be cropping. So C for crop. Next, we're going to talk about cropping the image. Cropping the image, if you just do C for crop, is going to crop the whole image as well as all the layers underneath. You can come to the anchor points and hit the Shift key if you want to make constrained adjustments to the same aspect ratio that the image was imported on. You can also come up to your unconstrained original ratio, change it to a 1:1 square, 4:5, all these other selections over here, or you can create preset selections in this menu area over here. You've also got all these other great options where you can select the rule of thirds grid, a more intense grid, a diagonal grid, triangle grid, all that good stuff, your golden ratio. You also have your spiral, which creates a visual look, so you can move the content of your image based on where the visual spiral rule applies. You want to, this is the view where a viewer's eye naturally goes, whether they know it or not. Let's put it that way. So I like the rule of thirds setting. That way I've got my big grid areas to work with. And I want to put the content, the main content of the image in this third. In this third. I still want to include his hat. I still want to include this bottom area here. Might bring it up a little bit, leaving a suggestion of his hand and a suggestion of his belt, but that's not what we're here for. and make him the focus with leading lines surrounding him, drawing the viewer's eye and attention to him, the product, everything we're trying to showcase. Simply hit enter or return to set the crop. And let's see how we did. Control-Alt-Shift-E. This is another reason why I like the claw move, because you've got a way to see a fabulous before and after. So that's after, and that's before. So we really bumped up the quality, the tone of voice, the method, the look of this image, and really brought the focus to where it needs to go, and the distracting elements in the background are actually playing to our advantage by drawing the viewer's eye through photo manipulation. Adobe Photoshop is really great for post-production artists wanting to step up their photography game through manipulation. Please shoot in RAW. You should only be using Photoshop for minor adjustments, minor color balances, accents, just background manipulations. It's a photo editing software. You can use it for these type of manipulations, but start with RAW first. This is an example of using a JPEG image for starters, and then using Photoshop to do your color balance, do your sharpening, do your blurs. So with RAW, it's so much easier to make the majority of these adjustments in the camera raw setting. Please check my previous video on RAW and landscape photo editing, the beginning of this path that we're on right now, where we're doing session photography photo editing. Take a look at the landscape, and I went into some in-depth techniques with camera raw. So I do hope that this video was helpful on some tips, tools, and techniques of how to post-produce modeling photography images, product photography images, some things to be mindful of, just some really great post-production techniques when you're dealing with a model. Make sure to like this video if you learned something new, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell if you have not done so already. Comment in the comment section below any tips and tricks you have for your fellow post-production artists on modeling, fashion, photography, or post-production. Until next time, I'm Jane Corley with PicVisions, Media Arts and Photography. See you later, guys.